Welcome to Daily Dose Radio, a 5-minute devotional podcast studying the Psalms verse by verse. Broadcast from the ever-beautiful Sharonville, Ohio, on the sunny side of Cincinnati. Hey there, friends. Welcome back to Daily Dose Radio. We are studying a wonderful psalm. Well, we started last week. We're continuing this week, and next week, the week of April the 8th through the 12th, we'll be looking at the last part of this psalm. This is Psalm 89. Today we're in verses 30 through 33. Kind of tripped over 30. I shouldn't have read it because it really goes with this section here today. And let me just go ahead and read these verses, and then I'll go back and make comment here. If his children forsake my law and walk not in my judgments, if they break my statutes and keep not my commandments, then will I visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. Nevertheless, my loving kindness will I not utterly take from him, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. You'll notice there in verse 30, it says, if his children, and now contrast that with verse 29, his seed. So his seed is the messianic language. His seed is, and go back and check 2 Samuel chapter 7, the promise to David. His seed is the messianic language. His children is not. This is not messianic. We're not talking about anybody here but the descendants of David that go through Solomon and all the way up to Jehoiakim, the last king of Judah. So that's what we're talking about. We're talking about those men who are going to sit on that throne, the earthly throne of David's line, and what happens to them. Well, so we're not talking about Messiah here. We're talking about the actual human portion of that lineage. If his children forsake my law, and guess what? They did. They did it over and over and over, and eventually the Lord had to judge them. But you'll notice we have a repetition here, beginning in 30. If they forsake my law, my judgments, verse 31, my statutes, my commandments. And of course, this is straight out of Deuteronomic language. This is language we find in the book of Leviticus, language we find in Numbers, and we find it all over the Psalms too, of course. We're going to see it countless times in the chapter 119 in the Psalms, because when we talk about the law, judgment, statutes, commandments, and there are other names that we could use here, testimonies is another one, we're talking about God's revelation to the people. And so my law, my judgments, my statutes, my commandments, these are the things they rejected. They forsook, they walked not in, they broke, they kept not. So we know that they did that. We style this with an if his children, if they break. Well, it's sort of a rhetorical if, because we know what happened. And I know that Ethan, the writer here, knows it's a rhetorical if as well. Even if it hasn't come crashing down on them yet, he knows that it will. And then verse 32, then will I visit their transgression with the rod and their iniquity with stripes. That happened because, Nebuchadnezzar came in and he carried them off. However, there's promise. You'll notice the promise here in verse 33. Nevertheless, my loving kindness will I not utterly take from him, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. Even though they rejected his law, his judgments, his commandments, his statutes, even though they forgot them, didn't walk in them, broke them, didn't keep them, God is not going to walk away and forsake them. He's not going to break his promise, and he's going to keep his faithfulness, because God doesn't do that. When he says a thing, when he promises a thing, he carries through with that thing because his word never fails. Our word might fail because we're flesh, and we might say something or do something that breaks covenant, but God's covenant will never fail. Nevertheless, he says, my loving kindness I will not utterly take from him. Why? Because he promised David. He promised David, nor suffer my faithfulness to fail. So God is true to himself. He is always true to himself. He's always true to his word. You can always trust his word. Join me tomorrow, and we'll pick up there in verse 34 and read 34 through 37 down to the Selah. I'll see you then on Daily Dose Radio. Thanks for listening to Daily Dose Radio. I'm David Smith. The music today has been performed by the Bluegrass Experiment. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time on Daily Dose Radio.